Hi everybody. Today is September 12th, 2021. Just a few days ago I did a post about Warren Zevon passing away 18 years ago in 2003, and I had kind of forgotten that both he and Johnny Cash passed away in the same month, the same year. So today has been 18 years since Johnny Cash left us. And so much has been said and written about him over the years that it's hard not to say anything that hasn't been said or sound repetitive. So this isn't an album ranking. It's just kind of going through some of my favorite records, a couple more obscure, a couple more well-known, but the albums that have really had a big influence on me, as well as a couple other things here. Johnny Cash passed away at age 71 from Shy-Drager syndrome, which is like Parkinson's on steroids, basically. When it hit him in the late 90s, he was mid to late 90s, he was still able to record and tour for a little while. As many of you know, and we'll talk about in just a minute here, his career was on the biggest upswing it had been in a very long time. Long and short, he started in the mid-50s on Sun Records, and maybe that's a good place to start right here. He started in the mid-50s, originally wanting just to do gospel music, and Sam Phillips, founder of Sun Records, wasn't overly impressed with Cash's gospel music at first. I actually forget whether it was originals, covers, both, but something just wasn't gelling. So he ended up writing a song based on his time in the U.S. Air Force, where you talk about an interesting life. He was actually the first American to hear the news of the death of Joseph Stalin, from the USSR, and he was the one who broke the news basically to the Western world. I mean, right then and there, that earns him a place in history, the history books. So anyway, put together a band. Not a lot was really going on, and then he wrote a song based on his time in the Air Force. He'd seen a movie called Behind the Walls of Folsom Prison, and it was originally a very slow song. Sam Phillips got him to make an up-tempo version. Came out as Folsom Prison Blues. Again, I'm not going to describe a lot of the early songs, a lot of the hits. And the thing about Cash is a lot of his music really didn't change over the years. There was a beautiful simplicity to it. And he put out quite a few well-known singles in the 50s. He encored at the Grand Ole Opry. And so the first collection of songs, first hits collection, here it is right here. Johnny Cash, let me get the title right, with his hot and blue guitar. So, the Rock Island Line, I heard that lonesome whistle, country boy, if the good Lord's willing, cry, 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 remember me so doggone lonesome, I was there when it happened. I Walked the Line, Wreck of Old 97, Folsom Prison Blues, and Doing My Time. What's really neat, this is an OG pressing. The cover is rather battered. The album is not in great shape. When my parents and I, and my sister too, when my family moved into my great uncle's house after he passed away, there were some records out in his shed. So who knows how long I have no idea how long they've been out there. This was one of them, and so I rescued those records, and surprisingly, it's not warped more than just a tad, not overly scratched. It did not have a sleeve inside it, so rescued it. I've played it. I haven't played it in a long time, just because you can get the songs anywhere else. I really like to keep this one. So this is kind of the first treasure of mine, probably the biggest one I'm showing you. Original pressing, Sun Records pressing of Johnny Cash's first LP, comprised of his singles and B-sides to that point. So that's really neat to me. He moved to Columbia Records in the late 50s. Sun lost a lot of its great talent, and he ended up making just a ton of albums, and I have a lot of them. Hank Williams covers songs about the American Indians, songs about the plains, songs about albums about railroads, a lot of concept albums, a lot of very good ones. Some not so good because of his voice. Everybody knows the famous story about him smuggling amphetamines back across the Mexican border. He got busted. He was just a hopeless addict. He had 4 young daughters. His marriage to his first wife collapsed. He ended up marrying June Carter. She was the one who saved him. He actually, his addiction was so bad, he crawled into a mountainside to die, not to commit suicide, but just to lay down and die and let himself go. And the good Lord's words and the Holy Spirit touched him and got him out of there. And there were his mother and June Carter waiting for him at the other end. And so she was really his salvation, his savior. He goes to record live at Folsom Prison, live at San Quentin. Do yourself a favor, find the remastered, expanded editions. The originals are great, but they're censored. He used a little blue language for the time. Now it would be nothing. But especially, Boy Named Sue, SOB, they blocked it out, And so find the full concerts unedited. They're really, those are the ones worth finding. I've got a CD box set with them. It's fantastic. So again, but I don't want to touch on those because everybody knows about them. Then he went and did the Johnny Cash show, where he introduced music of all genres. He had Louis Armstrong, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Glenn Campbell, you name it. Anybody from genres, huge names were on that show. It was very successful. Filmed at the Ryman Auditorium, which at the time was still the home of the Grand Ole Opry. So that was really neat. And he put out a fantastic album named after his famous catchphrase called "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." And it opens with "If I Were a Carpenter," a duet with his wife June. Ends with "Jesus Was a Carpenter," Chris Christopherson song. He'd helped bring Chris into the mainstream by recording "Sunday Morning Coming Down." "See Ruby Fall," "Blistered to Beat the Devil" is another Christopherson song. "I've Got a Thing About Trains," Route 1, Box 144, "Sing a Traveling Song," "Wrinkled, Crinkled, Wadded Dollar Bill," "'Cause I Love You," "The Devil to Pay," "Southwind," and again, "Jesus Was a Carpenter" closes it. To me, this is his best studio album of the time. So it's ranked pretty high by critics. I don't know if it was a big seller, but this is one, if you find it, definitely check it out. So then a lot more time goes by, right? He's famous in the 70s. Popularity starts to wane a little bit. He gets some credit as being a sort of an originator of the outlaw movement, even though because he was doing really rockabilly as well as country. He had that outlaw image, the man in black. He championed social causes. He championed the rights of the American Indians. He championed the rights of the prisoners, of the homeless. He visited the White House, and Richard Nixon wanted him to sing "Welfare Cadillac," and he absolutely would not. I think Nixon tried to get Merle Haggard to do that too. Nixon was a fascinating character, but these country guys didn't, who were country's perceived as this very hardcore, rednecky, ultra-right conservative thing, but a lot of the outlaws weren't. Willie and Cash, they definitely were not. So anyway, Cash was a big touring act through the 70s. A lot of live documents have been released since, some good, some not so good, depending on the quality of them. By the early 80s, he's dropped from Columbia Records. And, they weren't paying attention to him. He was doing the kind of music he had always done. It just wasn't selling. Unfortunately, they were really starting to look at the countrypolitan music again, the very easy to digest mainstream country. And Cash was still doing the same stuff he'd always done, and so unfortunately the albums were suffering. There were a few decent ones, nothing that was super solid from beginning to end. The last one I think was the Chicken in Black, and they pressed 500 copies or something, and it wasn't even recorded with a live band. It was crap. And I don't want to dump on people's art, but even Cash would later admit that this was just a ridiculous period for him, and it was almost better that he left. And so he was picked up by Mercury Records. They put a little effort into him, not as much I think as they should, but he ended up putting out some solid albums, better than he had been for Columbia easily since the mid-70s. And so this is one I got into. This is a CD I picked up with two of those on from 1986 and 1990 or 91 respectively. And so this was remastered. Johnny Cash is Coming to Town / Boom Chicka Boom. The second one I wasn't as big on early. And I'll get to that in just a second. But Johnny Cash is Coming to Town really sort of lit a creative fire under him. It was his voice was evening out. It lost some rough edges, but it was deepening. There was a warmth to it that hadn't been there in quite a while. The Big Light, The Ballad of Barbara, which is a take on The Ballad of Barbara Allen. It's an old Irish tune, or English tune, I mean. I'd Rather Have You Let 'Em Roll, which is, of course, a great Guy Clark song. The Night Hank Williams Came to Town, 16 Tons. He covers brilliantly the old Tennessee Ernie Ford song. Letters from Home, W. Leo Daniel and the Light Crust Doughboys. Heavy Metal Don't Mean Rock and Roll to Me, another Guy Clark song. And My Ship Will Sail. So, really solid. I bought, just this year, I finally got my hands on the complete Mercury albums 1986 to 1991 box set. And it encompasses a lot of material. This one is in there on its own. Water from the Wells of Home was a lot of covers, and he had guest stars on it. It was pretty good. Then he did one called the Hall of Fame series, where he re-recorded a lot of his old classics. I think so he and Mercury could have the rights to the original songs. Get Rhythm, Tennessee Flat Top Box, Long Black Veil, Sunday Morning Coming Down, 5 Feet High and Rising, the great gospel song Peace in the Valley. It's a double album, pretty good. Boom Chicka Boom is on here. He does a really soulful, heartfelt rendition of the Harry Chapin classic Cats in the Cradle. Farmer's Almanac. Farmer's Almanac has one of the funniest lyrics in it to me. Visitors and fish stink after 3 days. There's a lot to be said for that. Monteagle Mountain, Harley, really covers the old Willie Nelson song, Family Bible. So again, just nothing remarkable, but very solid. And so these albums, whether on CD or if you get this box set, the complete Mercury years, The Mystery of Life is on here, was his last one. The Greatest Cowboy of Them All. Hey Porter, Beans for Breakfast, which I believe was an old Tom T. Hall song. Wanted Man, the one he wrote with Bob Dylan years back. Again, these are good albums. They may not be great. The only crappy one, and I'm going to pull it out and show it, and a lot of you out there have agreed with me on this one. We've talked before. Class of 55, where you got Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, Roy Orbison, and Johnny Cash together in a recording studio for the first time in many years. This one came out in 1986. The hopes were so high, and the songs were so poorly chosen. The production was terrible. Chips Moman, God bless him, the guy who helped bring Elvis back, but helped really sort of neuter country in the 80s. It's on there. He produced that. So anyway, but otherwise, a lot of solid material. So we'll keep moving. By this point, Cash's career was not that exciting, and he was touring a lot of small theaters, dinner places. He was a legacy act. Always annoying when you get a hair in your mouth when you're trying to talk. In 2007, they released a really, really strong performance. I mean, I don't want to say thousands of people in the audience, probably hundreds of people in the audience at the Paramount Theater in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Here's a great live document from that time called The Great Lost Performance. He's in fine form here. His voice was great. He had the Carter Singers with him. Opens up with Ring of Fire. Double hit of what he called Gospel Boogie, Life's Railway to Heaven, and A Wonderful Time Up There, Folsom Prison. A lot of the hits, but then 40 Shades of Green, talking about his trips to Ireland. Come Along, Ride This Train, 5 Feet High and Rising, Pickin' Time. Great spoken word rendition of Ragged Old Flag, Ghost Riders in the Sky, a couple of June Carter duets, closes with I Walk the Line, a few other songs on here. Yeah, if you can find this, I think it's only on CD. I don't think there's a vinyl copy of it. This is one of the most probably pleasing concerts I think I've heard for Johnny Cash, and at this point he was doing it just for a mixture of fun and survival. Nothing, not huge crowds, but very enthusiastic. A lot of fun there. Then we come, he loses his contract with Mercury Records. He's not selling. The class of '89 for country had really taken over. Garth Brooks and Alan Jackson, all those guys were huge. There was apparently no room for good old JR in country anymore. On country radio, he was non-existent. So, he got rescued. I think a lot of you know the story. Rick Rubin, the heavy metal and hip-hop producer from Def Jam and American Recordings, who recorded the Chili Peppers, Slayer. He orchestrated the Aerosmith Run DMC collaboration in the 80s. Here's a guy out of New York. He met with John Cash and said, "I'd like to make a record with you." Johnny said, I'm not really interested in doing anything fancy. So they recorded, and I'm going to skip ahead. No, I won't. I have this on CD too. This one changed completely the way I heard Johnny Cash, and I think it did for a lot of people. This brought him back into the mainstream. He was getting play on VH1 and MTV. He was starting to tour bigger places, touring the big music festivals in Europe. It was fantastic. American Recordings won. Just Cash and his guitar, recorded partly at his studio in Hendersonville, Tennessee, partly in Rick Rubin's living room in Los Angeles. Opens with the murder ballad Delia's Gone. Some originals like Drive On. Covers Leonard Cohen, Bird on a Wire, the Doc Watson tune Tennessee Stud, The Man Who Couldn't Cry, which is Loudon Wainwright III wrote that. 13 was written by Glenn Danzig of the Misfits, specifically for Cash. Again, I'm not spending a whole lot of time talking about these things. Definitely look it up. If you haven't heard this is phenomenal. But this kick-started John's career, re-kick-started it again. And then the next album they did after that, a couple of years later, he recorded with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers as his backing band. Flea from the Chili Peppers did a guest spot on bass on a song called Spiritual. This was actually my first Johnny Cash CD or album of any kind. It's called Unchained. It's since been rechristened American 2 Unchained. I have the vinyl repress of it, and the vinyl represses sound great. But this, obviously holds a special place in my heart, because this was the one I kept hearing about it. Rusty Cage, he covered the Soundgarden song, and it starts off fast, breakneck pace on acoustic guitar, slows down, gets grungy for the third verse. Rowboat, See a Heartbreak, Rusty Cage, The One Rose, a re-record of Country Boy from his early days with the complete lyrics. Memories Are Made of This, Spiritual, Kneeling Drunkard's Plea, Southern Accents, which was a great Tom Petty song. Cash added a lot of depth to it. Mean-Eyed Cat, Meet Me in Heaven. Meet Me in Heaven holds a really special place. This is my music channel, but that was the first song. That was the song my wife and I had our first dance to at our wedding. She let me pick out a lot of the music, bless her heart. She was totally on board with that. So, we've been married almost 10 and a half years. We got married April 30th, 2011. And some of you who have watched this were actually there, and such a beautiful day. And I loved her then, and I love her more now. I'm very fortunate. So, this one, not only my first Johnny Cash CD, but then to have our wedding song is amazing. I Never Pick Cotton, Unchained, and I've Been Everywhere, the old Hank Snow song, and Cash's vocal delivery is perfect on it. You've probably heard it a million times on commercials and stuff. So these first two American recordings I would consider the most essential. There are some really high moments on 3, 4, 5 and 6. 5 and 6 were both taken from the last recordings he did after his wife died. June Carter died in May of 2003. He went right to work and recorded as much as he could. Marty Stewart was in the studio with him. There's a really heart-rendering photo, the last photo ever taken of Cash. I don't remember if it was the day before he died, the week, whatever, but look it up. Marty Stewart, who was a great photographer as well as musician and country music historian, took it. So there you go. Real quick, I forgot to mention this one, and I'm sorry. Recorded at the Montreux Jazz Fest in 1994. I don't know how, but I have 2 copies of this DVD. I think 2 different people gave them to me, or maybe I bought one and one was given. I don't remember. As the career was back on an upswing, this was recorded while he was over, obviously on a European tour. Features Delia's Gone, Tennessee Stud, Bird on a Wire, Let the Train Blow the Whistle, The Beast in Me, and Redemption from the new album at the time, American Recordings, as well as opens with Folsom Prison, Get Rhythm, San Quentin, Next Time I'm in Town, and a number of the well-known hits, because he, like I say, for a long time he was kind of a hits machine, but he always threw in a few album tracks and a few rarities too. 60 some odd studio records. I should have done my homework. I didn't look it up, but you're going to have peaks and valleys with that many. It cannot be a consistent body of work. So I'm just choosing to highlight again some of the ones I really like. Some are not as well known, some are very well known. But this is a really cool concert to pick up, and there have been so many archival releases since his death, and even a little before that, it's hard to navigate. I'm not going to tell you where to start other than what I've presented today. If you want to learn more about him, Johnny Cash, the autobiography. This was actually his second one, and it was more detailed. This was revised not long after he got his diagnosis with Shy-Drager syndrome. It told most of the story. A lot of his early childhood traumas and whatnot came out afterward because he did not want to put down. His father was really a rough man, not very supportive. He gave him a lot of credit while he was alive. He didn't stir the pot or air dirty laundry. John Cash was just not that kind. So you get most of the story, and you get all honesty, but you don't get the whole story. But again, so worth reading. A part autobiography, part tour diary, part recording session notes. Johnny Cash, the autobiography. I've read it. I lost track of how many times. I don't know. And maybe this is a sign that it's time for me to read it again. So wherever you are, John, I believe it's heaven. John Cash was a Christian through and through, a faulted man, and he knew that. He always said that the dark and the light reside in all of us, and to strive for the light. He was an imperfect man, and that's what made him such a model Christian. He did his best. He failed sometimes, but he did far more good than bad. And if we could all follow that model of thinking, if we could all live our lives like that, we would not obviously have that. Not everybody's bound for astronomical success and riches, but we could all do our best to be good human beings. And Cash would be pushing 90. He was born, I forget the date, February, but 1932. So he'd be 89 years old today. It would be interesting to see what Cash thought of the world today. We could really use someone with his humanity again, and maybe we can, like I've said here, maybe we can try and model ourselves after that a little bit. So thank you, John Cash, from the bottom of my heart, and from millions and millions and millions who you've inspired over the years. Please check all these albums out. List some of your favorites. I look forward to hearing from you. Take care, everyone.